I think we now have a feel for what MICAH Parsons is going to give us, especially in the offseason, obviously in the regular season and in season, but especially in the offseason too. It's never going to be boring for the next 5 or 10 or however many years with MICAH Parsons in a Dallas Cowboy uniform. Mike Fisher at the Star in Frisco, and MICAH has done it again. I know that there are critics of Parsons' offseason, gently critical of the idea that it's almost like MICAH's having too much fun, too much too soon. He's dropping pucks and throwing out first pitches and going to wrestling. But he's enjoying himself. And I think we've learned, even though he's been here a short time, the great rookie from last year, he'll be ready for football and he'll be ready for training camp, and he's not going to let goofing around get in the way. But here's an entertaining aspect of MICAH's offseason that is football important. He is suggesting that he can be part of a Dallas dynamic duo, MICAH Parsons and Trayvon Diggs, that can go get the Rams dynamic duo of Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. Now that, if I had my sunglasses, that would be a what? That's something. At the beginning of last season, through the first 7 games, you could already start to see, especially record-wise, the Cowboys guys were making those plays and the Rams guys were making those plays, and both teams were 6-1. Then the Rams stepped on the accelerator and the Cowboys did not as a team. And the Rams, of course, win the Super Bowl. And now that duo is pretty legendary. Donald, friend of the show, Troy Aikman, will say that Aaron Donald might be the best defensive player he's ever seen. And in addition to all the great Cowboys that Aikman played with, he played against Lawrence Taylor, played against Reggie White twice a year or more against those guys, and still thinks Aaron Donald might be the best of the best. And then Jalen Ramsey, I think most people believe that he's the best cornerback, all-around cornerback in football. And they get their Super Bowl, and the Cowboys get their first-round loss. But that's not deterring MICAH from thinking they can get there in more ways than one. Quote from MICAH to USA Today: "It's hard to say we're the best because we're young and we make mistakes. It's hard to put us over Aaron Donald, the greatest defensive player in history. It's hard to put us over Jalen Ramsey, so I won't do it yet. But I think we can become them, or even better, if we learn together and stick together." That's a gigantic if, but you frame it right, and MICAH's not being irresponsible in his highly confident statement. He's saying we can if. If you look at the career trajectory, okay, well, now it doesn't sound like that much of a hot take. MICAH in his first year gets 13 sacks. Diggs in his second year gets 11 interceptions. So the trajectory would suggest that he's on to something. Similarities to Donald, different positions, of course, but really difficult to block and really important to account for. MICAH was the 12th overall player in his draft. Aaron Donald, the 13th overall player in his draft. In retrospect, how in the world did Aaron Donald last to the 13th pick? Am I remembering that? I think I'm remembering that right. MICAH would have won MICAH wins Defensive Rookie of the Year, and is right there with TJ Watt in a lot of ways. And as a rookie, had more sacks and more tackles than Aaron Donald did when he was a rookie, 13 and 84 to 9 and 48. It's something. And what about Diggs? What does MICAH say about Diggs? I love Diggs because he's a dog, and dogs understand dogs. His risk that he takes, people talk about this a lot, is pointed out because he has such a one-on-one position. People don't realize that a lot of people gamble throughout the game. Even I gamble. Anytime a running back gets loose, you take a gamble as a linebacker. But, of course, as we know, Diggs' gambles pay off. And his gamble, as we've discussed many times, is within the system. He's not freelancing. We think MICAH Parsons was about as good a defensive player as there was in the league last year. What does MICAH think? Quote, without a doubt, I thought DIGGS was the best defensive player in the year. We've seen 20 sacks, but in this era, we don't see 11 interceptions. So he thinks people are being disrespectful to DIGGS. And I think most people in Cowboy Nation agree with that. He says, last year I was a fish in the water, still growing mentally and as a player, just kind of getting used to things. He will now be a bigger fish in a similarly large pond. Maybe Trayvon Diggs can be the same thing. And then maybe, just maybe, the trajectory will have history start looking at these two guys, Diggs and Parsons, as being somewhere in the same arena with Donald and Ramsey, which would be a grand accomplishment all by itself with the Cowboys in Frisco at the Starfish.